Hey, what's up, everybody? For this video, this is actually going to be a video response to AMCN1, Aaron. He's out of Ireland, actually. So definitely subscribe to him. He's a very intelligent person, YouTuber, whatever you want to call him. He tells you why he doesn't like something, and or if he does like, he does a very good explanation of going into the details with certain matches and certain angles. Um, so with this guy, he's kind of been very critical of a lot of the famous WWE matches of all time. So me and my brother is here. He's going to help me out, and we're going to kind of, go in depth and kind of respond to some of his criticism about, a lot of those famous matches. And AMCN1, he's more of a Japanese wrestling fan. He loves Puro, and the more he watches Puro, he's kind of developed a distaste for the American indie style, the Ring of Honor style. So, but I respect his opinion, though. Even though I don't agree with him a lot of times, it's pretty interesting to watch his videos. So, definitely check him out. So, here we go. So, the first match that he criticized and well, not really criticized, but talked about was the Angle Benoit match from the Royal Rumble of 2003. So, Alex, what do you think of the Angle Benoit Rumble match?
The Angle Benoit Rumble match. I mean, I loved it. I remember at the time I really loved it, and I still love it. And it's one of those matches that people have a really fond memory of because it was such a marathon match, with these two great wrestlers putting forth all their effort. And Aaron, out of Ireland, basically, he's not like the typical wrestling fan who's just going to come and say, "Oh yeah, that was a great match. Oh, it was awesome." He actually, sort of made it sound like it was a bit of a spot fest. And listening to his critique of it, I actually agreed with him on some of the things he said about the match not, having the holds, not really building up the two wrestlers necessarily the same way, the best way that say Triple H and Shawn Michaels would. But I think one thing that Aaron doesn't look at is what was going on at the time in professional wrestling. Not also what was going on that night. You had Triple H versus Scott Steiner, probably one of the worst championship matches in WWE history. Also, at the time, I think wrestling fans were getting a little fed up with some of the stuff that was going on. The year before, you had the NWO come in. Hulk Hogan won the title, and it was kind of, throwing a throwback to early WWE days and some WCW stuff. So there was a little uncertainty of what the product was really supposed to be like. And then you hand this championship over to Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit in this big WWE championship match, and you've got two guys who, especially Benoit, who have never really had characters to fall back on. Angle had a good character, no doubt, but Benoit even more so, he never had like a good character to fall back on, especially when he became a face. So you have to keep in mind, it was almost Benoit, he always had a lot of pressure to have the best match that he could have, and them doing like these holds in the ring and trying to build up for the crowd, to build up to those great moments where the face comes back against the heel. They didn't really have time to do it. I mean, they could have, but it wouldn't have been as effective. Angle isn't Triple H. Angle isn't Ric Flair or some great heel who could put what type of hold is that? Would you call
Abdominal
it
stretch.
the abdominal stretch, or have time where you can build it up.
His controlled segments.
Control segments, I think, was the term you used, which I've never heard that before. It makes a lot of sense to me, but Benoit and Angle, they never had that momentum with their characters to build that up into the crowd. And at the time, being a fan, I really appreciated that two guys were going to go out there and have the best match that they could, because in the WWE fans, for WWE fans, that was such a huge deal. And I was glad that these two guys, two of the best mat wrestlers in the company, were going out there and they were going to show everybody, look, we're gonna do a marathon. We're gonna do something that you guys can't duplicate or replicate.
Well, so overall, I mean, this is probably one of your favorite matches of all time, right? And how would you respond to some of his criticisms about the submission wrestling not really being as good as it could have been? That there's other guys in Japan, have that shoot style even more than Angle and Benoit did.
I haven't seen that shoot style in Japan, and most likely, if they, I've seen some Japanese matches, and I can tell you for sure, the guy that they're wrestling for out there, they're wrestling for the crowd, but they're also wrestling for Vince. He is the #1 audience member that they're wrestling for, and if they turned it into a Japanese shoot style match, Vince would not be happy about it. Okay, because Japanese wrestlers don't play to the crowd. They don't, because their crowd, they cheer for them when they see something they like. They're actually a lot more mature than American audiences. And I'm not trying to insult American audiences. This is how we grew up. We grew up with wrestlers who play to the crowd, and Japanese wrestlers don't really play to the crowd. They treat it more like it's a sport.
Right.
Whereas in WWE, you can't expect, even Angle and Benoit, their submission moves and the way they apply them, they have to make it more dramatic. And that's what Benoit and Angle don't have that luxury, didn't have that luxury that the Japanese wrestlers have.
All right, as far as this match being a spot fest, how would you respond to that?
Being a spot fest, I don't completely disagree with that statement. I think, well, like I said, I think this was Angle and Benoit's, coming out party, basically showing, look, we're gonna make it a spot fest, and we're gonna do the best we can to basically show everybody, look at how much we can pack into a match. Look at how much effort, how much energy, and how much skill we can have in one match. And that's what's really great about the match.
Well, they did show off a lot. I think Angle's running belly to belly was very well executed. Benoit's flying headbutt was his best flying headbutt ever because he hit it from like 3/4 away through the ring.
Right.
They really showcased a lot of athleticism as well as great wrestling. But I think the thing for me, and a lot of it, I know sometimes you say the crowd should have no effect in judging how great a match is, but I think here, I don't think anyone really expected Benoit to win, and the fans really got behind him, and it just got really emotional. And he got a standing ovation after the match, which is something you do have to.
He did lose, but he won the crowd.
He won the crowd over. And going into the match, I don't think a lot of the crowd and a lot of the fans really were really that excited about Benoit going for the title. A lot of the fans wanted to see Brock and Angle even more so than Angle and Benoit at the time. So I think you have to give Benoit credit there as well.
You can't take credit from either of those guys. I mean, it was a fantastic matchup in that regard. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is you can't expect Benoit and Angle, especially at that time, to be able to have the type of ideal match that I think maybe Aaron is sort of saying, well, they could have done this or they could have done that. Well, not Angle Benoit, not at that time, not with the fact that, they didn't really have a whole lot to fall back on, but their talent, but their skill. That's what they were falling back on.
All right, so let's just jump into the Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin feud. The first match he talked about was Survivor Series 1996. Which he didn't like. He thought it was Bret was very routine, really not a lot of interesting stuff going on. I kind of think the match is a little bit overrated. I've heard a lot of people say this was Bret's best match ever, and with 5 stars without a doubt, even better than the WrestleMania 13 match. Honestly, I think the crowd was kind of dead at some points in the match. I think it could have been a little bit more intensity at some points. Overall, I still think it's kind of like a technical clinic, and it really was one of the first times we started to feel the crowd really get behind Austin as well. Bret's comeback match. This is Bret's first match back from a long layoff, so I think you have to cut him a little bit of slack. But overall, what were your thoughts on his Survivor Series 96 analysis?
Survivor Series 96. Survivor Series 96. I agree with that. It wasn't a great match. It wasn't a 5-star match. I think a lot of people like it because it's Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret Hart, on pay-per-view for the first time. There were a lot of good spots, and there also were, obviously, they just worked well together. They worked very well together. You could tell as soon as they touched, it was a good combination. You had this technician versus this guy who had a roughneck style. So the chemistry was great. The opposites really attracted here, not just in their wrestling styles, but in their characters as well. And that's what this is sort of what started the feud that built up to the great WrestleMania 13 match. But in this match, you could already see that sort of shift, with Bret Hart being more of this wholesome character from another era in the WWE, trying to continue to thrive, trying to continue his success with this brand new version of the babyface in what was the beginning of the Attitude Era. And it's, you know, the Bret Hart Steve Austin stuff was usually less about the match and more about the angle, more what was going on around it. But no, this isn't a super great match, but it was a good match. It's fun to watch, and I should say before, I wanted to bring up an analogy, because I think when Aaron comes on here and he maybe criticizes some of these matches, some people might react with, "Oh my God, I can't believe this kid, you know, he doesn't like, you know, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels. He doesn't like Bret Hart versus Steve Austin." And, you know, these, because I think what happens is these matches, we sort of put them in a frame, put them in a box, and we say, that was a great match, that was a great memory. And somebody goes back in and they sort of criticize it a little bit. It's almost like if someone came into your room and you had a painting on your wall, and they look at the painting, and the painting is perfect, it was done by Picasso, it looks beautiful and everything, but they come in and they go, you know, I don't like that. I don't like that color there. And I don't like this color there. I don't like the choice they made with the brush strokes there. And you're like, what? You know, fuck you. You know, my painting's that's my painting. You know, it looks fine. You know, because I think after a long time we start to say, this match was perfect, or this match was great. And when someone comes back in to sort of critique it a little bit, it bothers you. You can't help but feel like, oh man, what's he talking about? You know, but I actually, you know, I agree. You know, we make more of it. We make more out of it than it really was.
So with the WrestleMania 13 match, the submission match between Bret and Austin, it seemed to me, you know, a lot of people's complaints was that Austin really wasn't, you know, playing with a lot of finishers. He wasn't really experimenting enough with ways to beat Bret, and you really never thought Austin had a chance of winning this match because of that. And also, the match is praised more so because of Austin's character development throughout the match rather than the match itself. And also, he kind of felt like Bret was kind of just being Bret, kind of routine, and he kind of got the feeling that AMCN 1 Aaron kind of feels that Bret is very dull, kind of like the way Shawn Michaels thinks of him, right?
Right. Shawn Michaels critiqued Bret Hart for, you know, being dull with some of his moves, doing matches the same way over and over again. I don't think this is an example of when that was happening. In fact, I think Bret Hart did a lot of different things in this match. I disagree with the notion that that Steve Austin should have had more technical moves going into this matchup. I think that was sort of the whole point behind the match, that Steve Austin didn't give a shit. He was going in there to beat Bret Hart up. He was going in there to hurt the man. He was gonna, one way or the other, he was gonna make him say, "I quit." Whether it was with a punch, whether it was with a chair shot. Obviously, you don't make someone say, "I quit" with a chair shot. But he didn't care. That was his character, and that's what it was about. You can't. That's the thing with WWE, guys. You can't take a match that's built around an angle, that's built around the characters, and then start critiquing it because it didn't have technical moves that some guy in Japan uses. It just doesn't. It's a different audience. It's a different crowd. It's almost a different art form in a way. You know, they're working with different elements here. And in this match, I don't love the match because they go into the crowd and they beat each other up in the crowd for what seems like 7 or 8 minutes. I hated the Attitude Era because a lot of matches, like The Rock and Austin, some of their matches, they would do that. They'd go into the crowd. You give a lot of credit to Bret Hart because, you know, he really built that up. You know, that whole feud leading up to it, the promos he had. You know, I'm the best there is.
Talk about the frustration that Bret was trying to show, the frustration from last year's WrestleMania 12 loss against Shawn Michaels. and kind of he used it
And
here.
I don't know if he planned this, but I mean, if you look back at WrestleMania 12 when he had Shawn Michaels in the sharpshooter, and Shawn Michaels didn't give up at the end of the 60 minutes that made them go into overtime. In this match, the same thing happens, and it's almost like he's taking out his frustrations on this new wrestler, this new person, who's getting away with this stuff that in that other era that Bret Hart was, kind of like the last hero of.